Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Is it time for me to start?
Yep.
Okay. Well, let me just tell you this. My name is EksAyn. And let me spell. A few of you have asked what my name is, so I'm going to spell it on the board. Write it like this: EKS, capital AYN. That is a capital right in the middle of my name. I got to tell you, they say it's Swedish, but I have been to Sweden, and I got to tell you, there's not a single person in Sweden. Not one person. My wife calls me X, just like Tammy did. Thank you. By the way, can I just say thank you to Steve and Colette? Thank you for having me in your home. Tammy, thank you for making this possible. Thank you for all being here. Nancy, thanks for making it possible and with taking this video here. But my name is EksAyn. I'll tell you this. They say it's Swedish. I've heard a lot of things about my name. When I was young, they called me insane EksAyn. Sometimes I heard EksAyn in my brain. Every once in a while, I get a good one. My favorite was sexy Exy, which I didn't hear. I liked it when I did hear it. So today we're going to be talking about how do we influence our children or our spouses or those we love or anybody. How do we influence people for good? How do we get people who are kind of stuck to go from a no situation to a yes? Now, before we go there, let's lay a foundation a little bit. I want you to think about your problems for just a second. We could call them challenges. Call them problems or challenges, okay? I want you to think about it for just a second. What are the things that keep you up at night? What worries you the most? And I want you to know that they all fall into three categories, okay? We have category 1 problems, we have category 2 problems, and category 3. Let's talk about what they are. Category 1 problems are things that are 100% within our control or influence, right? So they're things that have to do with our own actions, our own choices. So for example, when I was younger, I'm embarrassed to say that I used to get a lot of speeding tickets. That was a problem that was 100% in my control because it was my behavior. I'm the one who put the pedal to the metal, right? And I could change that problem, and I have most of the time since, where I don't get speeding tickets anymore. That's a category, stuff that's 100% in our control. It has to do with our behaviors, our actions. Category 2 are things that have to do with other people. So this is my behavior, or your behavior, right? Or actions. This has to do with other people's behavior. Now, other people's behavior, the truth is, we don't have 100% control, do we?
No.
We'd like to think we do. Sometimes people think, well, if I just say the right words and if I just do the right things, that I can get somebody to pop in gear and we can just do whatever we want. But the truth is, you can do everything right and people can still tell you, no, I don't want to do that. But there are things, the research shows that there are things you can do that make it way, way, way more likely. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. This right here, category 2, we have some control, some influence. Category 3 is stuff we have zero influence, okay? So zero influence are things like the weather. I can't control that at all. I can't control the stock market. I can't control even what I said 5 seconds ago. My past is completely out of my control. So when we think about all of these, there's 2 words that I think are really important to think about. The 2 words are this. As we look for solutions to all of these problems, the 2 words that I think are very profound are these. To change yourself. Now, this one's obvious. The first category is obvious. If I'm getting speeding tickets, I can change myself. But the second one's not as obvious. A lot of people say, well, why should I have to change when it's my spouse's fault? Why should I have to change when it's my teenager's fault? Why should I have to change when it's my boss's fault or your fault? And here's the answer. If your methods of influence had worked, you wouldn't have that problem, would you? And so you can change your approach. So this one here, of course, we just change our behaviors. This one's obvious. This one here, we change our approach, okay? And then the third category is stuff we have zero control over. So what are things that we just can't control? What I did last year, 5 seconds ago, my past, the weather. You know, Warren Buffett, you've heard of Warren Buffett? Mm-hmm. Kind of a rich guy. Guy has, I think last time I checked, he had around 128 billion. Back in the last the last economic downturn down in 2008, 2009, that area right there, there were a lot of people who were thinking, goodness, the sky is falling. Let's run and sell everything and hide. But Warren Buffett was doing something different. You know what he was doing during that time? He was saying, everything's on sale. Let's go buying. So he was buying railroads and all kinds of stuff. And he had an attitude of gratitude for a market crash. It's one of the reasons he has the market's cash. But
So he changed his attitude.
He changed his attitude. So here's the thing. Category 3 is attitude. Now, the things we're going to be talking today are this category 2 stuff. Category 2 is, what are the things that make it more likely that I can influence my children or my spouse? What are the things that are research-based, that are really, really real? And to do that, we've got to talk about principles. So let's talk about principles right now. What is a principle? Any ideas?
Principle is
Yes.
it's a timeless truth. Yeah.
Who said that?
There we go. That's how.
Nancy said timeless truth. Okay, I love that. Yes. Any other ideas? In fact, that was perfect, Nancy. Thank you. Any other ideas?
I was just thinking it was a natural law.
Natural law. That's awesome too. Tammy, thank you.
I
Yes.
I like timeless truth better.
Timeless truth, natural. I think they're both right.
I agree.
Any other ideas?
I would say it have to pertain to our realm
Yes.
because Christ looked like he could manage other truths that weren't part of the 3D world we live in.
There's probably principles that we don't understand.
Yes,
Absolutely. Okay, so timeless truths, laws that apply to our realm. So today we're going to talk about principles of how do we influence people. We're also going to talk about techniques, but before we go forward, I want to just talk about principles for a second. You're exactly right. A principle is something that is really, really, really real. It's something that's bigger than me, it's bigger than you, and it's something that's real whether we believe it is or not. Let's use one example. Let's use a scientific principle just to start. Principle of gravity. Gravity is real. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Gravity works here. It's keeping me on the ground. It keeps you in your chairs. Gravity works everywhere. Gravity works in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Australia, North Pole, South Pole, everywhere. In fact, gravity even works out in space.
Yep.
Gravity is what keeps the moon going around the Earth, keeps the Earth going around the sun, keeps the satellites going around the Earth. Billions and billions of miles away, there are clusters of galaxies held together by gravity. It's everywhere. And when we come in contact with gravity, we have a couple choices. We can align with it, or we can ignore it. So let's have some fun with this. How could we align with gravity? This is kind of a funny question, but I'm going to ask you this. How could you align with gravity to, say, make you money? And this isn't about money, just so you know. This is about influence. But I'm just going to go down this road just for a second to illustrate a point. While you're thinking about that, let me give you one example. I was in Vail, Colorado a while ago. In Vail, Colorado, why do people go to Vail?
Ski.
They go to ski. So people come from all over Colorado. They come from all over the United States, sometimes all over the world to go to Vail. They get there, they check into a hotel sometimes, and then they get to the ski resort, and they take this lift up the mountain, and they get off on their skis, and they have this thrilling experience being pulled down the mountain by gravity. So you could say that the people who are in Vail, Colorado, they have used this principle that's everywhere, and they've aligned with it, and their technique is they've built ski resorts. They make money off of it. They make quite a bit of money off of it. So how else could you make money with gravity? Let's go there for just a second. What'd you say, Jonah?
Invent an airplane.
Invent an airplane. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sort of flight, huh?
Jonah, what did you say, Tammy?
No, I was just saying some sort of flight.
So you're kind of defying gravity with airplanes, right? Thank you. Let's put that down. Thanks, Jonah.
Trampolines.
Somebody said trampolines. Who said that?
I said that.
Colette, thank you.
Trampolines.
Trampolines.
Trampoline fun. Maybe
Yes.
there's a lot of money in that.
Slippery slides.
Slippery slides. Hey, I'll put it on there. You get the slippery slides, and you could even take that one. You could do a water park where they could be pulled down. Put that water park. Any other ideas? How could you make money with gravity? I know it's early, so I'm asking you to think.
Zip lines.
Zip lines. Oh, yeah.
Parachuting, zip lines.
Yeah.
Janet, Andrea, thank you. What was that?
Bungee jumping.
Bungee jumping. Okay, you guys are going faster than me. We got zip lines,
Not me, but he does.
parachuting. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. We have
line, pierce.
But what do we have? Bungee jumping,
Any professional sport,
almost any professional put sports.
plastic surgery.
Oh,
Oh, you know what? I heard that one other time. We won't go there. We could defy gravity with the little plastic surgery. Was that Brad who said that? Okay. All right, we'll just leave that one where it is. The truth is, yeah, we could start a parachuting company. We could do skydiving and charge people. I don't know what they charge for skydiving now. $300, $400, $500 a jump. Well, we could probably sit here, and you're a good group. You come up with a lot really faster. So, bungee jumping, parachuting, zip lines, airplanes, trampolines, slippery slides, water park. We could do all of these. You know, here's one more that I thought I'll just mention. Like, what if we built a dam across a river and we let the water build up and we let the turbines go through, and we could sell our electricity for quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
We could come up with probably 100 or 200 things if we just sat here. Now, here's the other thing. What happens if we ignore gravity?
Splat.
Thank you. Janet, did you say that? Janet said splat, and that's the only word we know. We could get injured. We might even die, right? So gravity itself is this big principle that I didn't invent, you didn't invent. It's bigger than us. And here's the point. If I respect gravity, and if I am creative and in line with it, I could build a skydiving company. I could do a water park. Or I could ignore it and I could go splat. And here's the thing. The truth is this. We can do anything we want in our relationships with our spouse, with our children, with others. But we do not determine the consequence of our action. So we can say, people say we can just do whatever you want. Well, the truth is that's true, but the consequence is determined by what? What determines our consequences? And here's a hint, it starts with a P. The principle does. So can you imagine someone saying, sometimes people talk about this like, well, it's your truth or my truth or whatever. I'm thinking to yourself, wait a second.
What truth?
Can you imagine someone saying, gravity doesn't really work for me? It might work for you.
Nice
It doesn't work for me. That same person could go to the edge of the cliff and say, I believe I can fly. And they could jump off and what happens?
Splat.
Splat. Thank you. Thank you for that. Everybody in unison
me
said,
on my head.
this is a great group, by the way. Splat. So here's the thing. In relationships, in our relationships with our marriage, with our children, there are principles that are just as real as gravity. And we have a choice. Are we going to respect them and align with them? Or are we going to ignore them to our peril? Now, I've got a question for you. So what are these principles? Because if principles really control our consequences, wouldn't it make sense to step back for a little bit and say, well, what in the heck are they? Because I want good consequences and not bad consequences with my children. I want good consequences, not bad consequences with my wife. I want good consequences, not bad consequences with my business. And I've got to figure out what controls my consequences. And so this is a really important question. What are the principles that govern our relationships, that govern human behavior? And here's a hint. They're not the latest fad. They're not the latest coaching program. They're not the latest book. They're not the latest social media, something or other. Like gravity, they're ancient. They're timeless. They've been around a long time.
So one is sacrifice, I think.
Sacrifice.
The
Well, I like that. Thank you, Tammy. I like that. Thank you.
Principle of sacrifice.
Principle of sacrifice. Like, what are you willing to sacrifice?
Like for children and spouse all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Charity.
Love that. Charity, Colette, thank you. Like pure love, right? Pure love of Christ. Love
Integrity.
it. Integrity. Oh, I like that one.
Committed to growth.
Committed to growth. Oh, you're all right.
Responsibility.
Responsibility. You're all right. You're all right. I love this. You know what? You've reminded me. Marilyn reminded me of something. So I'm going to go where Marilyn's asking really quick here. I got to tell you this. One time, years ago, I was employed as a salesperson to answer a phone for this company that had millions of things for sale online. Not millions, hundreds. Please forgive me. Hundreds of things. And there was a lot of things. And this one guy, and I was on straight commission. They just hired me as a straight commission salesperson. Somebody called up and said, hey, I'm thinking about buying this one particular thing from you. And then they asked me a question. They said, would you buy it from you guys? Now, here's the truth. I knew you could get that same product on Amazon for cheaper. And I had a choice. Here's honesty, integrity, which is as real as gravity. And I had a choice. Was I going to align with it or was I going to ignore it? Now, by the way, a lot of salespeople that I know would say they'd just ignore it. And they'd say, well, just tell them whatever you need to tell them to get them to go. Luckily, I decided to align with it. And I just said, you know what? Don't buy it from us. Just go on Amazon. You'll get it cheaper. And some people think I'm crazy. Like, you're on straight commission. They're not even paying you an hourly rate. Are you sure you want to do that? I said, yeah. I told them, I said, go on Amazon. And I lost that sale. I didn't make it.
But
Well,
you didn't have a black mark against yourself.
thank you, Janet. Yes, I hope not. Here's the interesting
You
thing.
break God's laws, that doesn't go away
Thank you.
until you repent.
You know what was really interesting? I lost the sale, but you know what happened by the end of the call?
You felt good.
We bought more things.
Well, I felt good, but by the end of the call, here's the interesting thing. He made a massive order. I mean, a huge one of something else I did feel good about, so it wasn't on Amazon. And it was dozens of times bigger.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I think it happened, I could sense that it happened because he could tell that I was just a straight shooter. I was just going to tell him what was real. Well, if we want to build trust with people, if we want to have trust, we've got to do that. And we can talk about that. In fact, I will talk about that in just a second. So let's start with some ways. What are these principles? Let's talk about another principle that's super important when we're trying to influence our children for good, when we're trying to influence anyone for good. I'm going to tell you one more story. I was at a bank. Well, many years ago, I had a bank account, and I had a problem with the account. Guess what the problem was?
You were overdraft.
Thank you. How did you guess? So I didn't put money in the account when I should have put money in the account. And I had a bunch of stuff that was overdrawn. I had some fees, and I was embarrassed. And I went down to the bank to figure this out. And there was a gentleman, we'll call him Jeff. And Jeff was really nice. He waived a bunch of the fees. I put the money in like I should have. And when he was done, I looked at Jeff and I said, hey, Jeff, thank you so much for helping me with this. Thanks for waiving the fees. I said, can I get the email to your boss? And he looked at me kind of funny, like, why do you want the email to my boss? Until this was not something that was super, and I said to him, I'm going to tell him what a great job you did. And by the way he reacted, I could tell this was not normal for Jeff. Okay? But I got his email, I had Jeff's card, and I had now the email to his boss. And I went home and I took 2 minutes is all, and I wrote an email that said something like this. Dear Mr. Branch Manager, I had the opportunity of speaking with Jeff. He was very professional and helpful. I think he deserves a raise and a promotion. And I meant it. It was sincere. I didn't think anything else about it. He was nice to me, and I did something. I sent it to the boss, and I copied Jeff on it. Didn't think anything else about it. Well, I went back to this same bank maybe a week later or so, and I'm standing in line. And by the way, this is back in the days when you had to go to the bank more than you do now. Now you can do almost everything through the phone. But I was standing in line. There was maybe 10 people in line in front of me, and something happened to me that had never happened before. He came up to me and he goes, somebody came up. By the way, it was not Jeff and it was not the branch manager. It was somebody else who I didn't recognize. They came up to me and they said, Mr. Anderson. And I said, I'm a little surprised that he knew my name. And I said, yes. And he goes, can I help you with your banking? I said, well, sure. He said, follow me. And he took me from the back of the line over to this desk and he let me do my banking in front of everybody else. You would have thought I had $10 million in the bank, which we all know that I didn't, right? So, by the way, it happened again and again. I'd show up at this bank, and someone would come up to me, and it usually was somebody I didn't recognize. It was a new person, sometimes the same person, but they'd come up to me and say, can I help you with your banking? And I got to do my banking in front of everybody else for the rest of the time I was at that
Were
bank.
they wanting you to email?
Yeah, now why did that happen? Thanks for that. Why did that happen? They probably, that maybe there was a little conversation around the water cooler where they said, you know what? If Jeff can do it, maybe I could get one too. I don't know what happened. Well, I want you to hold that story in your mind for just a second. I talked about how I did some sales. Well, fast forward several years later, I'm sitting in New York, and this guy, this high-level director in New York, looks at me and he goes, you are the only salesperson I've ever let into my office, because I've done sales in the past, okay?
And what?
I've done sales. He looked at me and said that, and I was surprised because competition was fierce. And then he said something really interesting. And we're not talking about sales, we're going to talk about parenting. We're going to show how this applies to parenting, okay? He said something really interesting. What do you think I did to get into this appointment with the high-level director in New York and be the only guy I'd let in?
Hey, a secretary.
Pay a
No.
secretary. Didn't pay him. No, I didn't pay him. This is really interesting. It was almost the same thing that happened at the bank. Do you know that? What happened is I sent an email to this director, we'll call him Bob. He ignored me. Completely ignored me. Called in about a week later and said, hey, can I speak with Bob? Who did I run to? His secretary answered the phone. And she said words that they always say. She said, he's unavailable. And I said, okay, well, maybe what I could do is just send that email again and copy it to you to make sure it gets it. Would that be okay? And she said yes. And while we were talking, I noticed that she was just really friendly. She was really courteous and professional. Have you ever heard somebody who you can just hear smiling?
Mm-hmm.
You can't see him, but you can hear the smile. Have you ever heard that?
Oh, yeah.
I could hear it. And I said, I'm on the phone all day long. And I just really appreciate you being so friendly and courteous. It's refreshing. Thank you. And she said, well, thanks, in her nice, smiley way. And while I pulled up the email, she was still on the phone. I said, you know what? I'm going to mention that to your boss. She goes, well, thanks. Typed really fast. I said, dear Bob, had the opportunity to speak with Janice. She was very professional and courteous. I think she's an asset to your team. By the way, I'm going to be in New York on these days. And I sent the email to Bob, copied it to Janice. She's still on the phone. I just said, you know what? Did that email come through? And she said, there was a little pause, and she said, yes. And then she said, hey, thanks for the compliment. And I said, I meant it. That was it. And I didn't mean it. It was sincere. Back in the office, he's just told me, he goes, you're the only salesperson that I've ever led in my office. This is what he said. He said, the reason you're here is because you were nice to my secretary.
Oh.
He said, I talk to my secretary more than I talk to my wife. And some of these guys don't understand that. Now, here's what I want you to think about, because we're now going to get into the parenting portion here, but I want you to think about this. There's one thing that I want you to do differently because you came today. I want you to think, what are the principles that govern everything? What are they really? And you've already named a bunch, which I love. And how can I align with them? So let's go backwards here. We're going to erase this part, we're going to erase this part. You could say that my technique, okay, that helped me get treated like a king at the bank, that got me into this high-level director in New York, you could say that the technique was sincerely complimenting, if I can spell right there, I'm going to abbreviate, complimenting someone to their boss. And you can assume that I did align and not ignore with something, but what was the timeless ancient principle that I hopefully aligned with? Kindness. Thank you, Lawrence. Robin.
Well, it's an honoring the dignity of the human being.
I love that. Honoring the dignity of the human being. Thank you, Robin. Kindness. Exactly. By the way, you're both right. Any other ideas?
Gratitude.
Andrea, thank you. Gratitude.
Same thing, appreciation.
Appreciation.
Acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. Thank you, Eileen. You're all right. I'm going to call it something. I'm going to mix it all together. Everything you said was right. I'm going to call it the golden rule. Have you heard this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We all know what the golden rule is. We hopefully learned it.
Do unto others.
Is it kindness and appreciation and honoring the dignity of the human soul and acknowledgement? What did you say?
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yes.
No, I said do unto others before they do unto you.
Oh,
Actually, you know what? The thing you just said, we're going to talk about that, Lawrence, because there's actually something to that. Do unto others before they do unto you in a good way. If you can do it in a good way. Let's talk about this for 1 second. What if I had gone to the bank and I'd said, and been a bully?
Oh, yeah.
What if I had ignored the golden rule and I walked into the bank and I said, you know what? I can't believe you guys charge me so much and I make one mistake. Fix this problem and fix it now. Otherwise, I'm taking my business elsewhere and I'm going to tell everybody what a bad bank you are. Could I have would they have fixed my problem?
No.
The answer is maybe.
maybe.
Yeah, they might have.
They might have.
But they might not have waived the fees.
But what would have happened? Let's just say I was so mad and they're just like, just give him what he wants. What would have happened when I came back a week later?
What'll let you stand in the
Watch out
back
for
of the
that guy.
line?
They're like, yeah, watch out for that guy. He's a little bit of a time bomb. He's a little bit of he's just make him wait a little while. Will they have treated me like a king a week later?
Oh, no.
Probably not. You might be able to ignore a principle short term and get a short-term result. Like you can bully people and people might comply. I mean, even with your children, you can say, better do it now, and they might comply, but in the long run, it might not be the best choice, right? Not to say you can't be stern with your kids sometimes. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying Think about this now.
I don't
Yes.
know why I'm thinking about this, like, you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar.
Thank you, Jolene. You're absolutely right. Yes.
And that just seems to sum it up.
Honey works better than vinegar.
Yes.
So let me tell you this. We're going to go down this road right now. I studied psychology in school, and psychologists don't like to use the word golden rule. They'd rather use something more technical because it sounds more fancy. I hate to say it. Any of you who study psychology, I'm not saying anything bad. Okay, great. I'm not saying anything bad about it because I studied it too. But I will tell you this. They say
Positive reinforcement.
that's what they'll call it. They'll call it positive reinforcement. Now, does anybody know what positive reinforcement
Well, it
is?
sounds like manipulation.
Like a reward.
Yes.
Now, it can be used in a manipulative way. But let me tell you what positive reinforcement is, for those of you who haven't studied. They say that behaviors are like seeds, and attention is like water. You hear that? Behaviors are like seeds, attention is like water. Have you ever seen the parent? The parent comes in and says, I can't believe you stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning and you didn't make your bed and you're getting a C- in math and you're blah, blah, blah. What are they doing? They're actually watering the behaviors they don't want
Yeah.
with attention. And here's the problem. And it's not to say you can't bring up behaviors. We'll talk about the difference here. But they're probably making it more likely that those behaviors will occur again.
Yeah.
The studies, the research has shown that if you want to influence somebody, if you want to shape behavior, okay? Now remember, it's still category 2. You can do this and people might not come along. This is not a 100% foolproof. But your odds go way up. I'll tell you why. If you want to shape behavior, we've got to catch our children doing something right. Got to catch our spouses doing something right. So, let me give you one example. There was a kid in school. By the way, this comes from Glenn Latham's The Power of Positive Parenting, and I hope I'm telling the story correctly. There was a kid in school who was getting sent to the principal's office all the time. And it was becoming such a big deal that they decided to call in the school counselor and see what was happening. The school counselor decided to come down and watch. And what was happening, they found that the kid, as the counselor was watching, they noticed that this trouble kid was actually doing a lot of things right. He was listening, he was obeying instructions a lot of times, but nobody was acknowledging that in any way. Like Eileen said, there was no acknowledgement. Completely ignored. But as soon as the kid did something wrong,
He got acknowledged.
he would get acknowledged. So the teacher would go, oh, there you go again, and write his name on the board. And then he'd do something else, and he'd get the check mark. And he'd do something else, and he'd get another check mark. So then he had enough check marks, and then they marched him down. Well, here's what happened. This counselor was following behind. They marched him in, put him here when he got there, the secretary of the school said, hey, I knew you'd be here. And she sat him down right next to this window. They found he was being doubly reinforced because what would happen is when the bell rang for lunch, the kids would come by and they would be like, hey, he's the cool bad kid, and he's kind of waving and they're waving. So he's getting attention from his peers and from the teacher when he's bad. And the counselor was like, it's kind of predictable. You know why? He's getting a lot of attention when he does something wrong and zero attention when he does something right. If we want to start influencing, we've got to catch our kids doing something right. So I learned this principle a while ago, and my daughter came and knocked on the door. She was like 6 or 7 in the morning. It was like maybe 7 in the morning. So she knocks on the door and she goes, hey, Dad. I said, hey. She goes, guess what? I made my lunch, I made my bed, I'm ready for school, and you didn't even have to ask me. Wow. And I had learned about this positive reinforcement before, and I thought, wait a second. This is a behavior that I like. I want to water the seed. I went to my wife, and I talked to her back in the closet, and I said, let's see if this really works. And so I went out there, and I said, let's give her a lot of attention. So I went in, and I said, you know what? Your bed looks awesome. Thank you. You made your lunch, you got dressed. I didn't have to ask you. Thank you. My wife laid it on pretty thick, too. Well, guess what happened?
She did it every day.
She did it again, and we kept watering. We did it again, she kept watering. Well, got to the point where she would do it all the time. Now, what would have been less effective? Less effective would have been to wait until she doesn't make her bed, doesn't get up, and then storm into her room and say, how many times have I had to tell you to get up and make your bed and blah, blah, blah. And I could have been a real jerk about it. And guess what would have been happening? It would have been actually probably me making it more likely that she would do the behavior that I didn't want. Does that make sense? Why?
Recognition.
Recognition. You know what they say? That kids, they would rather have attention for being bad than zero attention.
Yeah.
Now think about that for a second. So we're going to go down that road in just a second. So there's other ways to try to motivate people and try to influence people. We can use punishment. And there's sometimes we can't. We can use negative reinforcement, which is I'm going to point out all the negative things you've done, and so I can show you. And guess what? You want long-term behavior change? Not as effective, not even close. Way, way, way more effective to catch people doing something right. By the way, that's what happened at the bank. Jeff fixed my problem with me. He got some positive attention from me and from his boss. Guess what? He probably talked about it in the break room maybe, and they may have said something. Janice in New York, she helped me inch that sale forward just a little bit. And that's what got me to this appointment with this high-level guy in New York. But if we want to influence our children, the research shows, you know what, like some parents, when their kids are behaving, they'll say, I'm just going to leave them alone. Like, don't bug them, they're happy. But you know what the research shows? And by the way, I'm going to tell you, a lot of this comes from this book. My brother recommended me to show this until we used it a little bit. It's called The Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham. It's a good book. Try it out. So the research shows when they are being good, give them attention. So if they're playing nicely, they say, hey, wow, I really like the way you're playing with your brother Johnny and sharing. It's awesome. Hey, I really love the way you're working on that math problem. And they say to make sure that the behavior, because what you're watering, you're not trying to water like a label. You're trying to water the behavior. So like point out the behavior, hey, I can tell you're putting a lot of effort into that math problem, right? And when you do that, you'll see that the behavior increases. Now, sometimes we want to get rid of behavior. Have you ever seen a kid tantruming? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know the kind of where they're just flailing on the ground going like this? One of the things they've said, if you want to get rid of a behavior,
You ignore it.
as long as it's garden variety weed behavior, right? If we're not talking about like
Yeah.
some stuff we've got to figure it out. But let me tell you, let's talk about this. Ignoring it is exactly what we're talking about here. So if you look, sometimes I hear people say, my child is such a bad kid, he's a tantrumer. But if you actually watch really carefully what's happening, when the child tantrums, what's happening?
Frustration.
The parent, a lot of times, is pouring on the attention. They're pouring on the attention. They're saying, why are you embarrassing mommy right here in the store? Do you want an iPhone? Do you want an iPad? Can I give you a sucker? What can I do to shut you up? And what does the kid learn? The kid learns that if I scream and yell, I get the iPad, I get the phone, I get the sucker, I get the reward, and I get mom's attention. And you know what when you're trying to extinguish a behavior, one of the things they say is most effective is to give them zero attention for that behavior. So you might even have a conversation like this. Hey, you know when you do that thing where you kick and scream on the floor? You know how you did that the other day? We're going to try something new. When you do that, you just get to go spend a little bit of time with yourself in a corner. Now, by the way, it has to make sure that there's a zero reinforcing environment. Okay? Zero. You can talk about the consequence, like this is the new thing we're doing. Get us in the corner. Now, you don't want to send them to their room where they could read a book, because that's actually a little bit reinforcing. You don't want to send them to some place where they can play video games or where they can have any kind of attention. Like, you want it in a zero reinforcement, because you don't want that behavior and it's not good for them to teach it. If you let people tantrum later on, they have real problems in life, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you know what happens when you do that? Here's what happens. Probably. Now remember, this is still category 2, but the research shows this is pretty predictable. You ready? If this is the number of tantrums my kids are doing, and here's time, okay? So the y-axis is this, the x-axis is this. And let's say I have a high number of tantrums. It's kind of high up here. And then all of a sudden I say, you know what? I'm going to implement this intervention, which is I am going to, from now on, when you tantrum, we're going to let you just kind of burn out in the corner. Now, here's the problem. You have to wait till they're burned out. Yeah. And some parents can't do this. So the kid's kicking and screaming and saying, give me attention. And mom is like, I can't bear to see my little baby in the corner screaming like that. And I'm going to go over and see what's going on. Now, by the way, if they have a tack that they're sitting on, you can check that. You can check if there's something that's pulling or hurting them or something. But once you've kind of seen that, if they just get a kick and scream for a while, let's just say it takes them 20 minutes to burn out. And then they've calmed down. As soon as they calm down, you can go up to them and say, oh, wow, I love it when you're calm like this. I'm going to water that behavior. Do you see that? Now, here's the problem. When you first do it, guess what happens to tantrums? When you first start doing this,
They get worse.
they actually go up
Yeah.
just for a little bit. Why?
Well, they're trying to get your attention more.
To see if it'll hold up.
They're like, wait a second.
testing you.
For 4 years, this has worked.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's not working anymore? Like for 4 years, every time I tantrum, mom gives me a sucker, and mom gives me the iPad, mom gives me attention, and mom holds me and cuddles me and cradles me and everything else. And guess what?
Bigger tantrums.
When you first start doing something new, they're like, I must be doing something wrong. I'm going to tantrum more. And the tantrums go up. This right here is called an extinction burst. But if you're consistent, guess what happens? Way down. They might have a little bit of a relapse here. This is called an extinction burst. And what happens is when you do the right thing, things get worse in the short run. In the long run, they get better. If they know that every time I get a kick and scream, I'm just put in a zero reintention environment, it doesn't work. Now, you got to combine this with, like Jolene said, honey works better than vinegar, right?
Yep.
And if we combine it with that, which is when they are doing something right, I'm going to give them a reward. Now, by the way, this is fun to do. It's kind of fun to catch your kids doing something right. And like the boy who was getting sent to the principal's office who was a trouble kid, they're probably doing a lot of stuff right. Jono.
At what age does this start being effective?
You know what, I got to tell you, that was a great question.
2?
Okay, I know with infants, there's, like, obviously an infant's totally different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? An infant, when they cry, they need food, they need something like that. So I don't know the exact cutoff, but I believe this works even with adults, okay?
For sure.
I believe it works with children and adults. I'm going to tell you, I believe that this principle is what got me into that high-level director in New York. I believe it's what got me treated like a king at the bank. And here's the thing. If you want to be a good influencer, we got to catch people doing something right. Now, thanks for asking. So, like, different rules with infants. Okay? And I'm not sure where the cutoff is. I wish I knew. If you really, really, really want to put your influence on hyperdrive, the next thing I'm about to tell you is super important. By the way, before I go there, let me just tell you one more story. If you want to get good at this, start practicing it everywhere, not just with your kids. Just practice it. Like my wife and I were at a restaurant once. This waitress comes up to us and she's joking with us and we're laughing and she's laughing and we're just having a great time. And I thought, you know what? I tell people when I go out and talk to people to go catch people doing something right. Let's try it. So I just said, hey, can you get your boss over here? Because I kind of like the boss thing. And she looked at me kind of funny, like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
I said, get your boss over here. The boss comes over, and I said, you know what? My wife and I would drive across town to come to this restaurant just because of her. She's awesome. Will you take care of her? And she was kind of surprised, and the guy was like, thanks for letting me know. Well, here's the thing. She came back to our table, and she had tears in her eyes. She said, you're the best table I've ever waited. Isn't that interesting? People, including your children, including your spouse, are hungry to have to be recognized for what they're doing right. And when you do it, you're aligning with the most powerful, you're aligning with the golden rule. You're aligning with something more powerful than yourself. Because don't you want to have somebody recognize you for what you're doing right? If we can start catching our kids doing something right, the chances that we'll have long-term influence and long-term relationship go way, way up. Now, can I guarantee it? Remember, it's category 2. We have some influence but not total. But the research shows way, way up. Now, I'll tell you one more story just because I'm on a kick on this one. I went to an oil change place and I did the same thing. I went to this oil change, these guys vacuumed my car, they Windex my windows, and I'm like, oh, I tell people to do this, why not try it? And I like the boss thing. I went over there and I said, hey, can you get your boss over here? And they said, okay. The boss came over and I said, you know what? These guys, they did a great job, super professional. Will you take care of them? And I said, when you get promoted, will you drag these guys into your spot? And the guys were standing right there, and I gave them, they got some positive attention for it. Well, here's the interesting thing. I came back to that same oil change place months later, and they said, hi, Mr. Anderson. They remembered my name. And they said, give that guy half off. I didn't even have to bring the coupon. It's kind of interesting. Like Lawrence said, it's like do unto others before they can do it to you. Like, when you're the first to do it, your ability to influence goes way up. Okay, let's talk about something else that puts this on hyperdrive, okay? In life, we have what are called expectations. By the way, this is super, super important. This is a huge relationship thing in marriages. It's a huge relationship thing with children, in anybody. So we expect a certain level of something. But a lot of times our reality comes in lower. So here's what I expect, but here's what's happening. What's the distance between these two things called?
Disappointment?
Disappointment. Thank you, yes. I'm going to call it disappointment. There's another word for it too, but we're going to use both. Disappointment, frustration, right? So here's what happens. If I expect something from Lawrence, and Lawrence it comes in here, or let's go up. Let's say that Lawrence expects, it's like I came to this speech and I was expecting to get something out of it, and then I don't deliver anything. Lawrence is disappointed, right? Or frustrated. Well, what happens if these lines get even further apart? What if my expectations go up? And my reality goes even further down. Now I'm not just disappointed, I'm disappointed.
Angry,
I'm
cynic.
frustrated.
You become a cynic.
You could become a cynic. Thanks, Janet.
You can have unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
I know those things. So here's one of the things you can do. If you want to have good relationships, you've got to realize you can't change anybody. You can't change your spouse. You can't change your kids, but you can influence them. But if I go around saying, man, I really expect my wife to have a perfectly clean house every time I come home, even though she's got 5 kids, right? And I expect this, well, guess what happens? I set myself up to be really disappointed and really frustrated, and maybe even angry or sick, right? But if I can go and expect my wife, she's probably had a long day, she's been with the kids, and I'm just going to expect that it's not going to be perfect. In fact, the house might be a wreck, and that's okay. What happens is if I expect reality, if I can get it to the same place, I'm now not going around claiming that my wife is robbing me. Did you hear that? So I get to, and that's okay to lower your expectations on that particular thing. I'm going to expect
She's
reality.
with the kids. That's
She's with the kids. How dare? Yeah, if I come, the house should be
That's the
perfectly
priority.
clean. Yes. And here's the thing. The next piece here is how can we really want to influence. We can use the same principle, because guess what happens? If I'm trying to influence my spouse and build a relationship with my spouse, if I can flip these lines, watch this. If I can flip the lines so that my wife's reality is better than she expects, this distance is no longer disappointment and frustration. Guess what the distance is now?
Joy,
It's delight.
delight.
It's good things. Let me tell you this. I've gotten this wrong so many times. I want to confess. What I'm about to preach to you, I want you to know I've blown it thousands of times. But there was one time I got it right. I'm going to tell you the time I got it right. Can I tell you that?
Yeah.
So my wife, it was around the holidays a while ago. And she started saying stuff like, I'm just really missing my parents. Her parents used to live in San Diego. And she said it again and again. She goes, I'm missing my parents. I'm missing my parents. I'm missing my parents. And I'm kind of a slow learner, but I eventually just said, you know what? This might be an opportunity for me. Yeah. So I called up her parents without her knowing. Secretly, I called them up and I said, you know what? I think I'd like to surprise Katie and send her down to see you, but I'm not going to tell her, so don't say anything. What's a good weekend? And they'd let me know a weekend. It happened to be a weekend. It was near the holidays. And I went and secretly bought a plane ticket to San Diego. Didn't tell her. Then I had my oldest daughter, who was a teenager, help me pack the bag so I make sure I had all the right stuff in it, right? Packed her bag secretly. Didn't tell her. Now, the next thing is I wanted to surprise her. So I had to get her near the airport. And it was during the holidays, and we'd already seen the lights, back when the lights were still there. And I told her, I said, let's go down and see the lights. And she said, we've already seen the lights twice. And I said, yeah, that's true. Well, maybe we could go with my brother and some others. I said, then our kids could have a chance to play with their cousins. And so she kind of reluctantly agreed. She goes, okay, that's fine, we'll do that. So we planned this event to go downtown. We're driving along. There's a place in the freeway where you can either go downtown or you can go off to the airport. You know what I'm talking about? About 3 miles before we got there, the perfect thing happened. She said, you know, I'm really missing my parents right now. She didn't know that I had her bag packed. She didn't know I had a boarding pass. But here's the thing. And I said to her, I tried to do it with the straightest face as I could. I said, you know, I think you should go see your parents. And by the way, I said, I could tell she didn't think that was that big of a deal. I go, I think you should go see him. And she's like, I could tell it wasn't, she didn't think the big thing. Well, anyway, we were following my extended family down to go see the lights. And we got to that place where you got to turn to the airport. And I turned, like when they went this way to the lights and I went this way to the airport. She looks at me, she goes, you missed the turn. And she was a little annoyed. And I said, well, you said you wanted to go see your parents. Let's get you to go see your parents. Let's go there. And I could tell she was mildly annoyed. She's like, well, you know, here you got me down here. I'm sorry, is there a tissue?
Yeah, right there.
Sorry. She goes, you got me down here, and we're gonna miss this. And so, but I kept driving. I said, well, and she knows I like to joke around because I like to joke around a little bit. So she thought I was just joking. Well, we pull up to the terminal, and I get out of the car and I go grab a bag and I hand her a bag, and then I hand her this boarding pass, and she looks at the boarding pass and it has her name on it, and she goes, is this real? Is this real? She said it like 12 times. I said, it's real. I'll take the kids. Now, by the way, I did not tell my other kids, my younger kids, because I know there's no way they're going to keep a secret. Right? So I said, my kids just are finding this out too, and they're screaming and they're excited. And I said, I'll take the kids. You just go enjoy your parents. She goes, is this real? Is this real? Anyway, she walked off. They were so excited. My wife was so excited. She called me, just so excited. I got to say, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I'll just say things were good for a long time, right? Things were good. And why was that?
Because you thought of her.
Right, and also because for once in my life, right, I was able to make her reality better than she would expect it. And because of that, there wasn't frustration, there was delight. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. If I want to influence my spouse, if I want to influence my children, if I want to influence the secretary in New York, if I want to influence the guy at the bank, if I want to influence the oil change people or this, what I've got to do is, number one, catch them doing something right. And if I want to put it on hyperdrive, I do it in a way that's unexpected. You know what the research shows? When you surprise somebody, the feelings of good go through the roof. I could have done this differently. I could have said, okay, hey, Katie, let's plan a date for you to go. And then what would happen is her expectations would have risen to the point where that was there. And then I better deliver, because now if I've got more expectations here. But when I surprised her and said, hey, we're just going to go see the lights, which she was kind of like ho-hum about. But then she ended up on a plane to California to see her parents who she'd been missing. That was way better. Now, to do this kind of unexpected thing, we've got to understand who we're working with too. Now, let me just tell you this. I've sent my wife flowers in the past, and guess what my wife's reaction is to flowers? By the way, my wife's an angel. I just got to tell you that. She's amazing. She is an angel. Tammy's met her.
Yes, yes.
She's wonderful. But when I've sent her flowers, this is her reaction. Thanks. I'll just say this. Flowers, just for whatever reason, just don't speak to my wife. But you know what drives my wife wild? Is if I give her a foot rub or a back rub or I help around the house. Like if I start doing the dishes, man, it drives her wild. When I did something like I'm going to take the kids so you can have a break, drove her wild. Because her love language, if you want to call her that, was service, not gifts. She's not a gift person, but she is a service person. And by the way, I fall short on that one. I know a lot of times, but at that one time I got it right. Right? So how can we catch people doing something right and do it in a surprise way? Well, that's what happened with my wife. Things were really good when I did that. It's what happened at the bank. Jeff has a certain level of expectations, but when he had a compliment to his boss, somehow that was enough to talk and probably have things happen, right? So I want to ask yourself right now, what are some things that your children have done, or your spouse, or someone that you'd like to influence that's close to you? I want you to think about it. Think about the last day or two. What are some things they've actually done that maybe you haven't given any attention to? Here's the thing, you got to take your phones out if you got them, and I want you to go give them attention right now for them. Now, you might get distracted. You might have 20 emails and 14 other texts. You can't look at them, okay? You got one task alone. I want you to text something if you can think about it right now, say thank you so much for the hard work you did, or thank you so much for providing, or thank you so much for that, whatever it is. And send them a text right now, out of the blue, unexpected. Take a minute. Don't get distracted on the other. If anyone's text you, let it go. Is that okay? I didn't catch your name when you came on. Tell me your name.
Ready?
Yes.
Katie.
Katie. Oh, I like that name. You know, it's my wife's name. Katie, thanks for coming. Now I want to ask you, you've done that. Wrap it up for just a second. Do something. The research says when you're trying to shape a behavior, at first you got to get a lot of attention, but you don't have to do it every time. Some people think, well, that would be weird. Remember we had that. If every time your kid does something right, you're like, hey, attention, attention, it just gets weird. And that the good news is you don't have to do that. The best way to make it happen is when it's random. It's intermittent. Mm-hmm. You know the people who do slot machines, gambling, they know this. They know the best way to get people addicted to something is to make it random. So people put a quarter in the slot machine and nothing happens. And they put another one in and nothing happens and nothing happens. And then on the 6th or 8th or 12th time or something happens. And the person's like, wow, now I can really win. And they keep going, they keep going. And they know that that intermittent reinforcement is actually, frankly, addicting. Well, we don't want to have, we're trying to get our kids to be, this is kind of a bad word, but addicted to doing good things. Is that right? Addicted to behaving well. So if you want to shape behavior, what you've got to do is you've got to say, I'm going to get variable reinforcement. It doesn't have to be every time because that would be weird. And it's actually more effective. Does that make sense? So today, how many of you here are married? How many people here get annoyed sometimes with your spouse? Now here's the next thing. I want you to think about a behavior that you hate for just a second. And don't say it out loud, but think about a behavior you hate. So you might be like, the socks get left out, or the toilet seat's the wrong way, or something just garden variety. Now here, I'm going to give you a challenge. You ready? First of all, I want to ask you, how much attention are you giving that behavior? Like, be honest. When the socks are left out, or the toilet seat, or whatever it is, are you like giving it a ton of attention? You want to try an experiment? This is going to be hard, by the way, because it means you have to change you. Category 1 stuff, you got to change your approach. Here's my thing. I want you to try this experiment with me. As long as it's garden variety weed behavior, kind of annoying stuff. Never mention it again. Starve that behavior. Never mention it again. Now, next. Start catching this person doing something right. And do it repeatedly. Whatever it is, the behavior you like, just like the boy who's getting sent to the principal's office, they're doing more of it than you think. Start catching them doing something right. And if you want to be really powerful, make it kind of a surprise how you do it. If you do this consistently, guess what you might see in a little while? The other behavior, that behavior that annoys you, might, no guarantees, might, chances are that it will dry up by itself because you're feeding the other behavior. Do you get what I'm saying? Here's the research, and I'm going to say this really slow. The best way to get rid of problem behavior in your children or your spouse or anybody is to focus on the good behavior. I'm going to say it twice slowly. If you want to get rid of problem behavior, focus on the good behavior. Now, I got to tell you, this is a great group. You're a group that's committed to helping moms, to helping liberty in our country, to helping freedom. The best outcomes happen when dads, when moms step up and realize they're the CEOs of their children's education. Do you know that? And I said CEO. You are the CEOs of your children's education. And as such, you get to decide if you hire or fire certain suppliers. As a CEO, you can say, I'm going to teach my kids. You can homeschool. You can join a co-op where you have different people have different strengths and everybody gets a little bit of that. You could decide that I'm going to put them in a private school or in a charter school, or I'm going to put them in or maybe I'm not going to have any school. I know of a parent, in fact, the parent's me. Let me tell you this. We decided that we wanted to have our kids in an immersion school where they can learn a different language, half the day, and then the other half the day, we were going to homeschool them. And later on, we decided we wanted to put them in a private school. You can do whatever it is you want. Now, some parents don't believe this. They think, no, I just have to drop my kid off to the nearest government-run school. And that's not the truth. You have the power to hire and fire. Schools exist at the pleasure of parents. Parents do not exist at the pleasure of schools. Do you understand that? How can we get that message out to people? How can we get the message out that the best outcomes happen when parents act as the CEOs? You can hire a school, fire a school. You can hire a tutor. You can get a violin and teach them violin lessons, karate lessons, piano lessons, whatever it is, a trumpet. But the buck stops with you, not with the school. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any questions so far? Questions? I want to hear some questions. Heidi Rock, yes. I do.
It's not with my own kids, but I teach a primary class, and I have a little boy does. And I only have 20 minutes in the class. He's very disruptive. Can you do something like that in a classroom setting, or is it harder?
Well, let me tell you this. So you have this is a class that you teach in Sunday school?
It's primary,
Primary,
and they're
okay.
6-year-olds.
Well, it's a challenge, and let me just tell you what I mean. You're probably fighting against 166 and a half hours of their parents'
Yes.
reinforcement. And what's probably happening is at some point, I'm not trying to throw their parents under the bus, but there's a good chance that the boy is being reinforced when he's disrupted at home, and then he comes to class and he says, I'm going to try the same thing. So yeah, you could do it in your class. Just realize
There's all those other hours that like don't have influence.
yeah. So you could say, hey, when you act like that, you get to sit by yourself. Or also, it also catches me like, wow, I really like it when you're sharing. I really like it how
Yeah, we do.
you're focused
Oh,
on
you're
all the
raising
good
your hand?
stuff.
Oh, that's so nice, you know, we do
That the behavior will go up if it gets attention, but you might have to be fighting a real uphill battle. Yes, Jillian.
That 20 minutes may be the time in that kid's week that he has for good intervention.
Good.
That's right.
Yeah, that positive attitude.
Yes,
I
Nancy.
think maybe doing a lot more.
Good point. Thanks, Jillian. Thanks for that. Nancy.
I had a son that was oppositionally defiant years ago. I mean, diagnosed that anyway, and just some challenges at the time. And one teacher had this scale where he could go move up or down, kind of like Abraham Gilead's Jacob's Ladder thing. But it was all about he could move up, and then the perimeters were just very helpful for him to visually see that. And that teacher changed his life that year.
Wonderful.
Because we met with her and then we replicated it at home, and it was helpful at the time. But I just wanted to share that he just moved down with my other sons to Texas, and his dad hasn't kind of been very active. But anyway, I'll just say in a nutshell, the missionaries show up. His dad just happened to serve a mission right there where the home was, and it blew his mind. But he's a good person, very good person. And it really touched him to see heaven doing this, that the missionaries show up right then. And he got talking to the missionary, and he's going, gosh, you look familiar. And he said, where'd you go to school? And it's like, told him where he went to school. Which elementary school? And he said the same one that he'd gone to. He went and got his yearbook and opened it up, and there they were in that class that changed his life. And here was the missionary in Texas at the place he just moved to, showing up at his door.
Wow. Optimism. That's great. That's awesome. So absolutely. And I like what Jolene said there. Neil A. Maxwell said something to this effect. He said, if we don't fix marriages and families, and I'm probably misquoting it, but something like this. He said, if we don't fix marriages and families, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. Did you hear that? So here's the thing. I'll read some news articles. I want you to start picking these out. You'll read a news article and you'll say, hey, and by the way, have you noticed this? they'll have truth and lies mixed together. Why do they have truth and lies mixed together?
Who's
Makes
they?
the lie go down.
It makes the lie stronger, actually.
Oh,
So what
yes.
happens is you'll read an article and it's like truth, 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 lie, lie, truth, truth, lie, truth, truth, truth. And when you get there, like, let me give you an example. I was reading an article and it was talking about the problems of violence and problems of violence, problems of violence. And then it said, and because of all this, we need to fund this program. Violence was true. Everything was true. But the solution was, we need to throw money at this thing. Now, those are well-intentioned things. Like some people say, well, this politician's going to save everything, or this politician's going to save everything, or this social problem's going to save everything, or this social problem's going to save everything. And here's the truth. Politicians can do a lot of good or harm, and social programs might have some good to do, but Neil A. Maxwell says something to the effect they're like sandbags against a tsunami.
Yeah.
Do you hear what I'm saying? If we don't fix marriages and families, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. If we don't fix marriages and families, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. I want to just read this. One of the things that I'm passionate about is helping dads. There's a guy named Don Feder, great man. He's a Jewish guy back in New York. Happened to connect with him even a little bit yesterday. He wrote an article, it was actually in the Washington Times, I think, and he said this: of the young men in prison, 90% grew up without fathers.
I believe that.
There's something about a father. When a father says, you know what, I need my daughter home by 11, it just holds a little bit more weight than if the mom said, not anything against moms, we need great moms, but I'm saying we need dads to be able to set that rule. It's been estimated that a 1% increase in single-parent households in the neighborhood results in a 3% increase in adolescent violence.
Whoa.
So every percent you go up, it triples. More than 70% of high school dropouts come from fatherless families. Criminal behavior, drug, alcohol abuse, early initiation of sexual activity are all far more common among children whose fathers weren't around in their formative years. 7 in 10 unplanned teen pregnancies happen when there's no father at home. So one of the things I got to tell you that I'm passionate about, that I ask for your help in, is I'm trying to start a movement where fathers realize how important they are, because they're immensely important. Where we give fathers the tools to say, hey, I want to lead, I want to protect, I want to provide for my family. You know, the way I look at it like this, you know, some people say, let me tell you this, my wife is lucky enough, I think, to stay home, but she has the major job in our family. I work so that my wife can do the best job, the more important job of raising our children. And here's the thing, I could build a huge business, maybe not, that was successful, maybe not. But let's just say it got wildly successful. You know what happens in a decade or two? That business will be bankrupt, bought, sold, disrupted. It will be gone. But the things I do with my own family, those will last for a long time. They'll last for years. Let me give you an example right here. I want you to think about it. How many here knows think about your great-great-grandfather. Do you know who your great-great-grandfather is? Okay. He had, I think, was it 8 or 16? You've got 16 great-great-grandparents. Do you know what they did for a living? All 16 of them? Do you care if they had a really cool horse? Do you care if they had a really cool plow? You don't. Guess what? Your great-great-grandkids aren't going to care what you did for work. I hate to say it. They're not going to care what I did for work. But the kind of parent they were is affecting you today. Let me give you an example. We all live in America, right? Why?
Because of our great-great-grandparents.
Sacrifice.
Because somebody in our past, for my situation, I had multiple people who decades and decades ago, over 100 years ago, came to America. As a family, they made the decision, we're going to get on a boat and come to America. Well, guess what? That decision affects me profoundly today. I speak English instead of Swedish. I live in America where I have different economic opportunities, different educational opportunities. My religion might be affected. Everything is affected because of choices my ancestors made before, family choices that are affecting me now. Now, that's an obvious one because it's geographic, right? But just as, maybe not as obvious, but just as real as, were they patient? Were they kind? Were they checked in or checked out. That is still profoundly affecting me today. And so I got to tell you, the choices you make are huge. I'm going to tell you a story that I should have told you at the beginning. When I was young, I used to like to draw trees. And this is how I would draw them.
Draw what?
Trees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking, Rob. I need to talk up, thank you. I would draw them something like this. I get out to the ends and I draw the leaves in the tree. I draw even the veins like this. I'm not going to take time to draw this, but you can imagine a tree with dozens of leaves. I went to school and saw how the other children drew trees. Guess how they drew them? You remember? Kind of like this?
Oh, yeah.
When I saw how the other children drew trees, I stopped drawing trees the way I used to, and I started drawing the way the other children did. And when my mom saw this, she cried. Well, fast forward a few years, I'm at a Little League game. By the way, there's a few different ways you can play Little League. You can be actually good and hit the ball, or if you were pathetic like I was, you just hold the bat out like this and the ball would hit and drop. It's called a bunt. I had one bunt the entire season as an 8-year-old boy. But I'm not here to tell you how pathetic I was at baseball. There was something that happened after this game. When we were done, we came home, and my mom complained of a very severe headache. And at one point, I think she said it was worse than childbirth. Now, my mom was not the type who got headaches. She didn't get migraines. And my dad became concerned. And he said, we're going to take mom to the hospital. And I remember standing there in the room, front room of our home. I went and gave my mom a hug, and I said, I love you, Mom. Then they drove away. I was a little concerned. It hadn't happened. I hadn't seen my mom taken off to the hospital. And my uncle just happened to be visiting us at the time, and I went to my uncle and I said, is my mom going to die? He said, no, she's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine. And I said, do you promise my mom's not going to die? I promise she's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine. Just relax. Everything's going to be okay. And it was getting late, and I went downstairs, and I climbed up on my bunk bed, and I started reading a book to try to pass the time. I still remember the book. It was a book about squirrels. I waited for my parents to get home, and I waited, and they didn't get home. Next morning I woke up, I was a little anxious. I climbed off my bunk bed, went to the edge of my room. I opened the door to my room. By the way, there's this long fan room on the outside, kind of outside of my door in the basement there. And I opened this door and I looked out and I could see my dad on the other side of the room. But something was different. My mom was not there. Instead, there was a neighbor and another neighbor and a friend and another neighbor and another friend and another neighbor. It seemed like half the neighborhood was at our house. And as I got closer, I could see that my dad had tears. He had water, tears on his cheeks. And as I got even closer, my dad, he was trying to hold it together. He gathered the children together, and through his tears, he said words I'll never forget. He said, I think our mom is going to leave us. And I started putting two and two together. And I went into a panic, and I said, Dad, we got to do something. We got to say a prayer. We got to do something. What can we do? What can we do to help Mom? My mom had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, which means a blood vessel in her brain had burst. She was now brain dead at the hospital, being kept alive by a life support system. 2 days later, I remember being in the hospital. I could see my mom. She had tubes coming out of her nose. She couldn't breathe on her own, so there was a machine that breathed for her, kind of. And I was scared because she did look like my mom, hooked up to all those machines and tubes and everything. And I remember it came time for them to take my mom off of life support. And when they did, I remember she kind of crinkled up and she turned bluish. And I remember wanting to give my mom a kiss, but I was afraid to because it didn't look like my mom. So I went and faked one. I kissed the air about an inch or two from her face, and I walked out. Well, my mom died that day, and as an 8-year-old boy, I watched my mom die. Here's my question for you. How do you think I draw trees now? Draw them the way my mom would want me to. But just knowing that little thing that my mom wanted to me has affected me in ways that you can't imagine. Like right now, in this moment today with you, I'm sharing my heart with you. In this moment right now, I'm figuratively drawing trees the way I see them. You know that? And even though my mom died decades ago, I haven't given her a hug since she drove away with my dad in 1986. There's something that's almost as good as giving your mom a hug, and you know what that is? It's feeling her influence. And I can feel it right now. So for you moms out there who wonder sometimes if what you're doing is making a difference, the effort you're making to help do good for your children, I want to tell you this. Your influence is more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And I'm in a unique position to tell you that. Your influence is more powerful. I want to tell you, moms, you've got more power. You are the most influential, powerful people in the world.
Can you give us the 411 on how to get your book? And not wait till
And what's the title one more time?
It's called What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die. My course for dads is called Dadfluence. And you can just Google my first name, which is EksAyn, Dadfluence, and it should pop up. It's unteachable.
But your name is so hard.
It's being, yeah, here, let me spell it.
I know, it's
EKS.
EKSAYN. What I've done is I've tried to put it in a 7-week system to help dads be able to do it. Now, you've got to wait till tomorrow because there's a tweak on it, so it's not going to work today. You got to do it tomorrow, okay? EksAyn Dadfluence is the name of my course. My book is called What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die.
Dadfluence?
And you can get it on Amazon.
Thank you.
Dadfluence, yeah, sorry. I should write a little neater. Okay, we'll make this last piece quick, but thank you so much for being here. Do you notice how I'm trying to give you attention for being here? Positively reinforce your behavior.
It's working.
Okay, great. So,
His book.
by the way, I want to just put in a plug for a few things. The Power Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham, great book. One of the things that helped me in my marriage, there's this lady named Tamara Fackrell, and she is a professor. Do you know her?
She lives in my ward.
Okay, so you know her. Just awesome lady. Okay, she did one of the things that makes her unique is she's a divorce attorney, but she's also she's got a PhD in marriage and family, and so what she did, she has this passion to help families. And she's like, look, I know what people fight about because I've seen it in divorces, and I'm going to show you how to build systems and how not to do it, okay? And so she has this course, I think it's called Mindful Marriage by Tamara Fackrell. One of the best things you could do. I think it's better than counseling. Yeah, Mindful Marriage by Tamara Fackrell, okay? Great resource.
Because she's in my
just spelled her
ward, she
name
does
for me.
teach classes, and I'll give Colette the information.
Yeah, she did something called Mindful Marriage. It costs a little bit, but it was probably one of the best things. You know, my wife and I, we like to listen to her videos, and so sometimes in the morning we'll watch like a little 10-minute video, and it gives us something to think about. Super good resource.
Say her name again.
Tamara Fackrell.
And the last name, sorry.
Fackrell.
Fackrell.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. She's amazing. Okay, I know somebody named Daniel who was recently accepted to Stanford, and it's kind of a big deal to go to Stanford. When I looked this up, this was years ago. Well, you know what? I'm going to skip this one because we're out of time. I'm going to skip this one. I want to tell you something really quick here. Do we have enough time?
Yeah.
You sure you want to hear this?
We're not rigid about time here.
Yeah.
You're reinforcing my wanting to tell. Okay, I'll do it. Okay, so here's the thing. Daniel was recently accepted to Stanford, and by the way, that's kind of a big deal. When I looked this up years ago, and I know these numbers are wrong, so be prepared to know they're wrong now, but I looked it up. Does anybody know what a Stanford MBA, he got an MBA from Stanford, what they make 5 years after they graduate on average? Any ideas?
$500,000? I'm just guessing.
It's probably that now with inflation.
Okay.
Like years ago when I looked this up, it was 285, and that was pre-inflation when we had this big
Yeah.
kick. So I bet you you're right. It's probably close to that. I'm going to use the numbers from before, and I apologize that I need to update my numbers. I looked up at the same time what the average household made in America at that time. It was about $55,000. I'm sure it's a little more now. So that's a difference of $230,000. Let's just say you work for 30 years past that. That's $6.9 million. Okay? Now, again, this number is probably closer, I think, to what Tammy said, probably $500,000. So these numbers are low. This is really low, this number right here, exactly because what Tammy pointed out, because it doesn't take into account cost of living.
Sorry.
You're okay.
She's crashing.
People tend to make more in their career. This is only year 5. Year 6 and 7, 8, and 10, and 12, usually people get better at their career. They're better, they have more connections, they tend to make more money, and then there's the inflation piece. This number really could be 20, 30, 40 million, depending on what inflation numbers we use and that kind of thing. But we'll say, because Daniel went to Stanford, there's a good chance he's going to make $6.9 million more than the next person. And probably more like 20 or 30, depending on what numbers we use. I went to Daniel, I said, hey Daniel, what did you do to get accepted to Stanford? I want to know. You know what? His answer really surprised me. He said this. He said, my dad taught me that if I didn't understand something, I had to go look it up. And I'm thinking to myself, millions and millions of dollars, maybe 10 or 20, at least 6.9 million. Look stuff up. I'm like, tell me more. He goes, well, it almost always happened when I was reading a book. I'd be reading a book for school, and I'd get to this word that I didn't understand. And my dad had just inspired and helped say, you know, if you don't understand something, I want you to take a little time and look it up. And so he'd go look it up. He goes, here's what happened. I'd come back and I'd know what the word meant now. But he goes, the real magic happened not in that assignment. He said, I hear that same word again on the radio or on TV, or somebody said that word in a conversation. He goes, and because I'd taken just a minute or two to look it up, I now knew what they were talking about. And he goes, and it became exponential because sometimes I had to look up a bunch of words, but he goes, over time, because I knew what they were talking about, I could understand different concepts better than I would have, I'm sure. And over time, it just made this massive difference. And I thought, well, that makes sense. But I'm still thinking to myself, look stuff up in the dictionary, millions of dollars. I'm like, Daniel, was there anything else you did? I mean, I was thinking, did you go to some crazy private school? Did you take a crash course? By the way, went to normal public school. I think he took one little course, but it was minimal and one that everyone takes anyway. And he goes, I went like this. I said, was there anything else you did? And he said this. He goes, I mean, sometimes I had to look stuff up in the encyclopedia. That was it. In his mind, it was just looking stuff up. Well, I thought about this for 5 years because I'm a slow learner. I went back to him 5 years later and I said, hey, Daniel, how much time a day did you spend looking stuff up? I want to know. Because you really feel like getting into Stanford was because you looked stuff up. And he goes, it wasn't that much. Because it's probably 5 or 10 minutes a day. I said, really? I'm like, well, what was it on a bad day? And he goes, it really was only probably 5 or 10 minutes a day, but maybe half an hour on a really bad day. Because that didn't happen very often at all. I said, okay. Well, I went home and I did some math. And what I did is I added up all the hours that he was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, all the way through junior high, or middle school, all the way through high school, even the first 4 years of college, including Christmas, including Easter, including weekends, Sundays, Saturdays, everything. And I said, let's put 30 minutes on every one of those days. Let's just assume that he had a bad day every day. And I'm going to divide it into $6.9 million. Does anybody have any idea how much this kid was making per hour?
Oh my goodness.
Looking stuff up in the dictionary is, say, a third grader? Any idea?
$500 an hour?
Close. It was about $2,200 an hour.
Wow.
Now, By the way, this number is low. Want to know why? Because it's using this number that doesn't have any inflation on it. It only is using year 5. If this really is 20 or 30 million bucks, this could be much more. Now, it's also using 30 minutes a day, which he said that wasn't the case. He said it was 5 or 10 minutes. If I keep this constant, but just go to 10 minutes, this goes up to $6,600 an hour. If I go to 5 minutes, it goes to 13,000 something. If I do this, he may have been making as much as $20,000 or $30,000 an hour looking stuff up in the dictionary. Now, remember in the beginning I told you I wanted you to think about what the principles are, right? What principle was he aligning with?
Compounding interest.
Compounding interest? Yeah, I love that, how you said that. You're right. I'm going to call that the law of the harvest. You know what, we reap what we sow. He was planting seeds. Later on, he gets to reap, right? If we can help our kids plant the seeds when they're young, they can reap. Now, why would I tell you this story, though? Well, I want to tell you this. The reason I tell you is because you may not think that your little tiny daily decisions matter. But I want to tell you, your little tiny daily decisions are everything. Like when I say to you, from now on, try to catch your kids doing something right, rather than pointing out all the things they do wrong, moms and dads, right? That might be like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Kind of like, if I don't know a word, I should look it up. But you don't realize how much sense it could make, right? Catching people doing something right, that might save your marriage. It might keep a troubled teen from committing suicide. I'm not promising it will, I'm saying it could. When I say, you know what they've done? They've actually done studies that if you want to influence someone, and I wanted to bring this up, you know that just listening to them, just listening, like really listening, makes the chances that they'll listen to you back go way, way, way up. Do you know that? Now that doesn't mean you have to agree. And that's part of the problem. Sometimes like we're listening, but then we're like, oh, she said that one thing, or he said that one thing again, and it triggered it, and you just get all emotional. Well, the little things are the big things in relationships. Just catching someone doing something right, listening to them. If I had 6 hours, we'd go through all the principles that I can think of. We don't. But let me ask you this. What are the little things that you know you need to do, but that you're not doing? Why aren't you doing them? Is my next question. And here's my guess. Because you don't feel like it. Am I right? I did that. It's kind of hard, and I didn't like doing it. I want to talk about that for just a second. Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he was at a presentation once. Somebody came up to him after the presentation and said this to him: I don't love my wife anymore. And it kind of surprised Stephen Covey. He said something like, well, then love her. And the guy goes, I've fallen out of love with my wife. She's fallen out of love with me. We just don't feel it for each other anymore. And we've got 3 kids. We're probably heading for a divorce. And Stephen Covey looked at the guy and said, if you're not feeling it, that would be a good reason to love her. And the guy goes, I just told you, I don't love her anymore. We've fallen out of love. How do you love someone you don't love? And this is what Stephen Covey said. Listen to this. My friend, you're acting like love is a feeling. Love's not a feeling. It's a verb. But if you do the verb, the feeling will follow. Did you hear that? I want to tell you, this is a principle. We can lead our feelings with our actions. You can lead your feelings with your actions. In other words, if I'm not feeling it for my wife, maybe what I need to do is send her to San Diego. Right? Maybe what I need to do is go do the dishes. Maybe it's not that I need to run off and get a divorce. Now, this principle is true. I had a friend named Brody. Brody did this thing called the Spartacus workout. He goes, I hated it. Has anybody done the Spartacus workout? You know what it is? It's this workout. It's like an hour long, and it's all kinds of muscle confusion. You do crazy things, and by the end, you're so sore, you can barely walk. And he said, I was so sore, I could barely walk. And he goes, but I committed to do it. So I did it again the next day, and I still hated it. And I did it again the next day, and I was so sore, I could barely walk. I wanted to die. And I did it again the next day, and I hated it. And I did it again the next day, I hated it. He goes, it was really interesting, though. I kept doing it because I'd committed to do it. He goes, week 2.5 or 3, something changed. said, I got to the end of the workout for the first time. He said, I felt like I was just getting started. He goes, I said, do you remember exactly what day it was? He goes, I don't. But it was right around week 2.5 or 3, somewhere in there. He goes, I got to the end. He goes, that day I did the workout twice and I liked it. He goes, it happened again the next day. I got to the end of the workout and I did it twice that day and I liked it. You see, one of the things they teach in school is that we should just do whatever our feelings tell us to do.
Yeah.
Okay? But here's the bad news. Have you ever noticed that our feelings are kind of like the weather?
Yeah.
We could be mad, and then 30 minutes later, we're embarrassed that we were mad, and then we're happy again, and we're sad, and then if you make all your decisions based on your feelings, guess what?
It's a train wreck.
Fickle results. Maybe instead of making decisions based on your feelings, we do something else. We say we're going to figure out what the principles are. We're going to make our little tiny daily decisions align with them. And then when that happens, it's the difference between like building a hydroelectric dam where you're selling your electricity and making millions of dollars and hanging on to a cliff where I feel like I'm about to die. It's the same gravity, right? One of them's making you money. One of them feels like it's going to kill you. But when we ignore principles, it's almost like we're clinging to that cliff. When we align with principles, it's like we've got good stuff coming down the line, right? Figure out what the principles are and align with them. Now, let's go really quick on these, and let's go really quick. What are the principles if I'm trying to influence my children? Okay? Number one, I'm trying to get my kids to go from a no situation to a yes situation because I know it's good for them. Listen to them. Just the very, very act of listening. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but they need to understand that you get them. Number two, golden rule. We're going to positively reinforce what they're doing right. We're going to get keyed into it. And occasionally we're going to do the unexpected, like managing expectations thing here. This makes it more likely. This is category 2. Is it guaranteed? No. But they found when people are listened to, the chances go way, way up. Yes?
I just want to say 2 things on the golden rule and the listening part.
Yeah.
You can listen and think that you understand, but until you can get the other person to say, after you explain how they're feeling back to them, so what you're saying is, you felt this and this happened and that made you feel this, is that right? And they say, yes, that's right. At that point is when they feel like they feel understood. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with them. You're just observing or labeling how they're feeling to get a that's right reaction. And then the other comment I want to make on the golden rule is a lot of times we project our own feelings of like, oh, I think I would want to be treated this way, and so you treat other people that way, and that's not how they want to be treated. And
Right.
so I'd say a more tailored approach is treat other people how they want to be treated in the best way possible.
Right. Some people call that the platinum rule, and John, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up. Did you hear what he said? So I'm going to do exactly what John said. I'm going to restate. So, tell me if I'm saying this right. When somebody actually says how they're feeling, restate back to them, reflect back, like I'm trying to do with you right now.
Right.
So they understand. They might understand that that was a key point of your message.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope you feel
Right.
validated. Okay. I'm really bad at this, by the way. I gotta listen to mine, and I'll start talking about something else, and my wife's like, did you hear me? I'm like, oh, sorry. That's what you're saying, right? Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Was there anything else that I missed?
No,
Okay.
pretty good summary.
Okay. One of the other things we can do, be humble, be willing to step down and be served when you're willing to. In fact, I want to show you this. I was going to show you this really quick on the slides. Let's see if we can get this work. The pyramid of influence. I'm going to skip through some of this. That's really cool. Okay, so we got this here. Here's the pyramid of influence. When we align with principles, which we actually walk our talk, right? We build trust. There's no other way around it. We've got to walk our talk. When that happens, now by the way, this is something from Warren Buffett. He said, somebody once said, when they're looking for people to hire, you look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. If you don't have the first, the other 2 will kill you. There's a lot of people who had intelligence and energy who were bad people. Okay?
Yeah.
You got to have integrity. So thank you, Marilyn, for bringing that up at the beginning. Okay, next, we've got to build the relationship. We do this by listening, positive reinforcement, exceeding expectations. These are just a few ideas. And then being truly humble, okay? That makes people open to us. Now, I'm going to do another Warren Buffett quote because I happen to like some of the stuff he said. He goes, most people get interested in stocks when everyone else is. The time to get interested is when no one else is. You can't buy what's popular and do well. Now, I'm going to change something here. Most people get interested in other people when everyone else is. Did you notice I took the word stocks and I changed it with other people? The time to get interested in when no one else is. You can't follow what's popular and do well. You get interested in your children and your spouse when no one else is. And you're investing like Warren Buffett on a relationship level. Do you hear that? Now let's talk about this. This is just one example. What's the best example of servant leadership you've ever witnessed? The top response. After a meeting of our executive director, a man in his 60s at the time, picked up a mop and started cleaning the kitchen floor. My wife was amazed and has been a fan ever since. He wasn't showing off. He was just being himself. Not a perfect human or leader, but he had some great qualities. This was one of them. Okay, when we do that, then we can speak the truth. And then we have real influence. Here's the problem. You know what happens a lot of times? Is somebody says, my teenage son is really doing stuff I don't like. I'm going to go talk to him. They start with speak the truth. But they forget the rest of the pyramid. They're saying, I need him to use his device less. But guess what's happening? They're on their device all the time. Even if you're telling them not to, but you're on your device all the time, right? And then, have I really listened to them? Have I really tried to exceed their expectations? You see, you've got to have the whole pyramid. Can you see this back here? Maybe you can't. Now, I'm going to tell you one more thing, because I think about principles about how to influence people. There's one principle that is more powerful than any other principle. And I think I know what it is. I'm pretty sure. But I'm going to tell you, every single one of you in this room, I believe, has a battle that you're fighting that others in the room don't know about. Am I right? Something that's hard for you that nobody else knows about. I'm going to tell you one of the battles that I have to demonstrate how this works, okay? My daughter Cheyenne was a beautiful angel baby. She had soft dark hair. She had deep brown eyes. And she was really calm. Like uncannily calm. Like sometimes as a baby, she would just look up at me. She'd lock eyes with me and I just have to stare back and look at her and say, it's just this feeling of calmness. It was almost like she was looking into my eyes, trying to find something in me. And when she would do it, I would just have to stop and just look back and just this calm feeling. Well, fast forward, I'm sitting on the side of the road. I get a phone call from a stranger. I pick up the phone, and the stranger says, "Your daughter has drowned." And I said, "What?" They said, "Your daughter has drowned. You need to come to the hospital." Now I got to tell you, I don't remember how that conversation ended. I don't remember. Somehow I drove to the hospital. Somehow I found my way in. I could see my 9-month-old baby daughter on a hospital bed. She had tubes coming out of her nose. And that wasn't the first time I'd seen those. I heard someone in the background say the words brain dead, and that wasn't the first time I'd heard those words either. And I got to tell you this. I walked into the room. There were a lot of people in that room who were not calm. But I went up and I touched my daughter on her arm right here. Just kind of right here. And as soon as I touched her arm, I knew in that moment she wasn't going to make it. But I felt calm. Almost like she was looking up on me calm, like it was okay. But still, I needed a little reassurance. I went over to one of the EMTs and I said, "Hey, what's going to happen with my daughter? I'm a big boy. I want to know. Give me the facts. Don't sugarcoat it." And he said, "I think she's going to make a really good donor."
No.
Oh my gosh.
By the way, some people thought that was insensitive, but to me, actually, I appreciated his bluntness. Long story. They wheeled my daughter out slowly to a life flight plane. We had to fly 200 miles to a specialized hospital. On the flight, I'm sitting there watching him respirate my daughter with a bulb. It wasn't the first time I needed someone I love needed help breathing. And for just a brief second, I could feel the darkness coming into me. There was something dark for a second there. And I just prayed. I said, please, God, please help me not to become bitter, please. And I haven't been. That prayer was answered. The plane landed, drove up to the hospital. Lots of things happened. Machines, things were hooked up. Eventually the doctors came in and they said, it's not looking good. And for the second time in my life, I got to see someone that I love taken off of life support. They put my 9-month-old daughter in my arms like this. She, by the way, she had a little bit of brain stem function. She could breathe just a tiny bit. The rest of her brain was dead, but she could just gasp for air a little bit. When they took her off, she just put her in my arms. And I just held her. I held her till she was gone. Now here's the thing. You came to this class. And I'm kind of a scary looking bald guy. Probably wouldn't want to meet me in an alley because I look scary, right? But you didn't know that I'd see my mom die or my daughter die. And here's the truth. Everyone you meet, I've shared this with you, but I know this about you. Each one of you has something that if we knew your story, it would change us. You would inspire us. Your story is powerful, and what I'm trying to say is, one of the reasons the golden rule works, what it really is, I'll just say this, the most powerful principle is to love others. Like Colette said, to have charity. And if you can look at every single person you meet like they are someone who has pain that you can't see, and treat them that way, your ability to influence them goes through the roof. You know what? You can make up a lot of the bad things that you've done as a parent. I've made plenty of mistakes by just really loving your kids, really loving your spouse. They know you love them. And so I'm just going to say it today, okay? I don't know any of you really. I've met Tammy a little bit. But for as much as I can, for someone who just met you, I love you. Thanks for coming to my class. Now go be great parents. I'm done.